Hey everybody, welcome to the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy, and it's always a great day when Rachel and Dr. Alexander Vindman show up for a visit. We will get to them shortly, but first, let me thank you for tuning in today. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So, our recent episode with Juliana Margulies has been in the news. I just want to add that I have known Juliana for many years and believe she's been misunderstood, as I have known her to be a passionate, committed supporter of African American, LGBTQ, and other marginalized communities. I also want to read some recent feedback that we've received on the Juliana Margulies conversation. Randy Shine writes, "Wow, so powerful. Thank you." Jennifer Beanstalk writes, "It really said all of my feelings out loud. I feel like I am in an alternative universe because people I have respected for many years are now saying Israel doesn't have any right to the land. Why can't people seem to separate Hamas and Palestinians? Why are Palestinians in America chanting death to Jews? Jews aren't chanting death to Palestinians. I fear for my children having to go to college. Just wanted you to know how much I appreciated this episode. It helped me feel less alone in my thoughts." Marcella writes, quote, "I loved your podcast episode with Juliana Margulies. Thank you both for speaking the truth. I am not Jewish, and hearing your voices was also a reminder for me that I am doing the right thing by continuing to express my support for the Jewish community and Israel." Yarden Singer writes, quote, "Thank you for this. I mean, it's devastating the world in this way, but having someone like Juliana speak up with this confidence, unapologetic, is the strength that we need right now." Sally Quill writes, "Huge fan of your podcast, Andy. Oh my God, this should be the anthem to the world. Just brilliant listening." On our Kevin Krim conversation, Randy Shine, a favorite listener of ours, writes, "I love how he and his wife have turned this tragedy into something positive. I can't even begin to imagine what they must have gone through." On our Miles Taylor conversation, Deb writes of the threat of Donald Trump becoming president again, quote, "I cannot understand how this isn't crystal clear to every thinking human. No one read Hitler's plan either. The only thing we ever seem to learn from history is that we never learn from history." Candace White writes, "The very thought sends chills up my spine." Marion Feldman writes, "Kudos for making me laugh, cry, mad, and sad. From Sammy's Romanian to Katz's to Halloween candy, and Miles Taylor comparing what's his name to Joe Biden, and without saying it out loud, a vote for Nikki Haley." Interesting. And just in general, Sandy and Ed write, "Hi, Andy. Quick shout out to say how much we continue to enjoy your podcast. Looking forward to and listening to your show. Cheers us up every week." All right, let's get to our two big things, the first of which is Israel. We learned last night that the Israeli government knew for over a year that the type of attack that Hamas committed on October 7th, almost down to every single detail, was likely going to happen. And they kind of wrote it off. They wrote it off as like unlikely.
Yeah, this was an incredible intelligence failure. You think back on 9/11, and we had some insights into what was going on, but we certainly didn't have a plan sitting there in the CIA or the NSA that said exactly what they were going to do.
Well, I would respectfully disagree that there was that August presidential daily briefing that said bin Laden's going to use planes to attack America. I mean, we did have that roadmap.
Yeah, no,
so
we have definitely.
To your point, it is a very similar situation to 9/11.
Oh, that was an incredible intelligence failure, but this seems even worse. This seems so much more specific. I mean, except for the date, I mean, the activities they were going to do are spelled out verbatim.
So if this doesn't galvanize the Israeli people to oust Bibi, then I don't know what will.
You know, perspective is so important. So if we go back to the days after the attack, the horrific attack, which I have to keep reminding people was the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, because I think a lot of people are forgetting that. Everyone was talking about this colossal intelligence failure, but we were talking about it in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. It was like, how could this have happened? Well, now we're starting to see what that intelligence failure actually looks like. And when you add that to the fact that Bibi had been incredibly distracted with the West Bank, with his self-preservation,
dismantling the courts.
Yeah, and so when you think about how unpopular and how tenuous his status was before the attack, this does not help.
On the other hand, George Bush was elected for a second term after 9/11. Just saying. Sorry.
Yeah,
wah, wah.
Yeah, no.
It's true.
I agree with you, but here's where I'll differ. Israelis in Israel aren't Americans in the United States. It's a different world there. And the stakes are much higher with this kind of shit. We had one attack. Israelis have been dealing with this since the beginning of time. And so now that they understand that this could have been prevented, perhaps, I think there's going to be hell to pay.
But this also pushes Netanyahu to really rile up his base, which is what Trump does. So the most right-wing crazies in Israel are the ones that he's going to activate and cater to in order to help himself get elected. He's been there for 16 years already, which is already insanely long, and he's been awful the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's going to be that, and there's also going to be massive pushback. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes right now. Politically. And now the flip side to all this is, and this is why this subject is so complicated, there was a deadly terrorist attack in Jerusalem, which killed 3 people, and Hamas took credit for that. This is during the truce. And this is why it's very complicated. This is why sympathizing with terrorists, I mean, it's just, we're living in a very chaotic, complicated, nuanced world right now. And I wonder what people are thinking when they see Hamas admitting to killing Israelis in Jerusalem while they were out in the streets in America protesting and calling for ceasefire. Things just don't make sense to me. And we ain't going to figure it out here.
No, we're not.
Nope.
But one thing we can figure out is big thing number 2, Donald Trump.
Easy peasy compared to Israel and Hamas.
The big thing of the week, Donald Trump. An appeals court judge reinstated the gag order against Trump and his attorneys in the New York State civil fraud trial, basically saying you cannot talk about court personnel, which you would think would be standard. The Koch brothers.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Said bye-bye. We're going with Tricky Nicky.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, keep your eyes on Tricky Nicky.
I'm going to completely push back on this. The problem for Nikki Haley is the things that she wants to do are not the same things that the Republican base believes in. So she talks about immigration in a semi-rational way. She talks about many things in semi-rational ways. And the base, who elect people in a primary, are just not on board with that. So as much as I would be delighted if she could take Trump on and win, I just think it's a fantasy.
Trump's base is now 25, 30, 35%. Well, that means there's upwards of 65% who don't like him. And I am not ready to say that the 65% who don't like him ain't going to have their voice heard on Election Day.
They just are not going to unify behind one candidate. There's going to be a bunch of Chris Christie people, a little bit of Nikki Haley, a little bit of whoever else is left. One thing's for sure, Ron DeSantis isn't going anywhere.
All right, let's get to our winners and losers.
I had a hard time finding a winner, so I'm going with losers. My first loser, Elon Musk, for live streaming his anti-Semitic rage to millions. My second loser, more hostages remain and Hamas and Israeli fighting resumes.
My winner is actually Jimmy Carter for proving that good can triumph over evil by outliving Henry Kissinger. My loser, it's hard not to make Elon Musk the loser because him talking to his friend Jonathan Ross. Oh, wait, Jonathan Ross Sorkin? I believe it's Andrew Ross Sorkin, but it was his good friend. Couldn't get his name right. But I'm going to give a double loser because I think Linda Vaccarino is also in the list of losers.
My winner, Lieutenant Michael J. Pence. Mike Pence's Marine son, who likely saved our democracy when he told his dad, quote, "You took the same oath I did, an oath to support and defend the Constitution." End quote. My loser, Elon Musk, who appears to be unraveling before our very eyes. Which brings us to our weekly rant. But first...
This had been said online. There was all of the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob Iger today.
I hope they stop.
You hope...
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go fuck yourself. But go fuck yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience.
Somebody really needs to turn that into some kind of like music mashup, like go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. Go fuck. Go fuck yourself. Anyway, Elon Musk sat for an interview this week with renowned financial writer, author, and CNBC co-anchor Andrew Ross Sorkin at the New York Times DealBook Summit. Many major advertisers have recently paused or severed ties with X, including Disney, Google, Apple, Lionsgate, Comcast, NBC Universal, IBM, Airbnb, Amazon, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, Jack in the Box, the New York Times, and Netflix, to name a few. During that interview, Musk later said that the advertiser boycott is, quote, going to kill the company. That will be what bankrupts the company, and that is what everybody on Earth will know. Nice try, Elon, but it's not advertisers who are going to bankrupt X, nor is it the watchdog group Media Masters, the Anti-Defamation League, Jews, or anyone else. You are the reason. You and you alone. You and your utterly insensitive, tone-deaf, conspiratorial, anti-Semitic, racist, transphobic, xenophobic bullshit you continue to spew with wanton pleasure and reckless abandon. And to be sure, advertisers don't, quote, blackmail. When you tarnish their reputation and negatively impact their sales, which is the opposite of why they advertise, they pull their ads. It's really quite simple. You fuck up, they bail. All right, let's get to Rachel and Dr. Alexander Vindman. Rachel Vindman is an opinion columnist at USA Today and a member of the USA Today Board of Contributors. She co-hosts the Suburban Women Problem podcast and is an advisory board member for the Renew Democracy Initiative. She's a prominent activist and plain-spoken political commentator on Twitter, where you can follow her at NatSecHobbyist. Dr. Alexander Vindman is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel who was most recently the Director for Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Russia on the White House's National Security Council. He previously served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and as an attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow and Kyiv. He is currently a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute and leads the national security think tank, the Institute for Informed American Leadership. He's an executive board member for the Renew Democracy Initiative, a senior advisor for VoteVets, and the author of the New York Times bestselling memoir, Here, Right Matters. He also frequently appears on NPR, MSNBC, and CNN, and remains engaged with principal decision makers in Washington and Kyiv. Rachel, Dr. Alex, welcome back into the back room.
Thanks.
Great to be back. You had some really good episodes lately, so I feel like a lot of pressure.
No, you guys you rank way up high in the list of all-time favorite guests in and on the back room. So no pressure at all. Just be your amazing, awesome selves, and you will keep ranking high. How's life in Florida?
It's good.
Anonymous.
It's a little bit cold, actually.
All right.
I shouldn't be complaining.
Define cold.
Well, so I had a trip to New York. It was 59. Then I had a trip to San Diego. This was all Monday, and then Wednesday morning I flew back, and it was 59 here in South Florida, and it was like a bit of a shock.
Yeah, but it's already back in the 80s. It's already back.
I lived for a while back in the day. I lived in LA, and I remember people be like, "Oh my God, it's 61. It's so cold. I have to put a light coat on."
Yeah, we're growing soft very quickly.
My favorite thing is about LA though, if it's like cloudy, they lose their mind.
Oh my God!
They're like, oh, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I'm like.
We're so sorry we're so sorry. Like they take personal responsibility for the weather.
Yeah, if it rains a half of an inch, there's storm watch on the nightly news. People are crashing on the 10 freeway. They're like crashing into each other.
Yeah, that's funny.
So the big Vindman news recently is your brother Eugene's running for Congress. Your twin brother,
very true.
Eugene.
Yep. My identical twin brother is running for Congress, and I think that maybe 20-30% think that I'm running for Congress.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that's where I wanted to go. Because the question that begs to be asked is, are you guys going to just like switch off on the campaign trail? Like if he wakes up with a hangover one morning and you're like, Alex, you got to go out there into Iowa, okay? And no one who would know the difference.
Absolutely. That's a done deal. You know how they say you can't be in two places at once? That's not the case in this scenario. But and frankly, this is awesome. I'm very proud and happy for him. He's off to the races already with a really, really strong launch and a groundswell of national support, frankly, viral support. And he just needs to convert that to the same kind of virality in a House district. He's in Northern Virginia, but it's going to be important, I think, not just for him personally, but for the region, for the country, keeping that seat in the Democratic hands, and he'll do good work in Congress.
Mm-hmm. And he's running in the 7th district, right, which is currently being held by Abigail Spanberger, who is running for governor. So that could be 2 nice victories next year for our side. Getting back to the twin thing, I have to ask Rachel, like, can you swear that over the years they've never like substituted each other? Like, Alex is like, hey, I got a date with Rachel tonight. I'm so tired. Can you go?
They have even very different voices. I mean, their pictures from when they were younger I don't even think their dad can tell the difference. But now, by the time I met them, they're pretty different.
How about sense of humor? Is you got a good sense of humor? Does Eugene have a good sense of humor?
He thinks he does. he thinks he's got a good sense of humor. I
actually just talked to them this week, and I was like, enough with the shtick. When it's the two of you, like, it's not as funny as you think it is. If it's a professional setting, knock it off and just talk to each other like adults. And then they can't do that. Like, they're sort of incapable of it. But I kind of had a moment this week because I'm done with the shtick.
I'm not sure if you could sense this, but there's a bit of rivalry for my affections, whether it's Eugene or Rachel.
I'm sensing it. I'm sensing it big time.
Competing for, yeah, it is true. It is. I mean, the twin thing is weird, but we live down the street from them, like, 2 or 3 houses away.
For 6.5 years?
Yeah, a long time.
Which was great for me. Might have been great for you. Yeah, it was great for me. It was Rachel was fine with it most of the time.
Florida. Okay.
Rachel's saying some of the quiet stuff out loud, I think.
Yeah, let's keep that stuff quiet. But anyway, I'm very close with my
you know me and my family. Like, I'm with you, Rachel.
So I'm very close with him. So he's got my 110% support.
He has my support as well.
And of course, he's got both of our support.
Well,
but,
in all seriousness, I would love to have him on. But until then, give me the elevator.
I'm going to sign him up.
Give me the elevator pitch for your brother. Like, what is the main theme of his campaign? What is he hoping to accomplish?
So there probably are a handful of critical issues. The fact is that like me, he served in uniform for. He did some reserve time. He served in uniform for 25 years, and we didn't sign up to defend the nation, defend the Constitution, defend rights, to have them threatened at home. Mm-hmm. And so that is one of the fundamental things he's fighting for. He's fighting for to make sure that ensuring our democracy remains safe, our rights for women, reproductive rights aren't infringed on, that we have a democracy to hand off to our children and grandchildren that's imperiled because of Trump and MAGA. Those are kind of the big picture issues. I think he's interested in making sure that weapons of war, assault weapons, don't make it onto the streets. So I think these are kind of typical centrist Democrat principles. Some basic legislation around gun safety. He's keen on the local issues. There is a large immigrant community in the region. We have certainly an enormous amount of currency and interest in that issue, being refugees from the Soviet Union. So I think there's an agenda on immigration reform. He's a foreign policy guy, national security guy like me. So keenly interested in pushing back on authoritarian regimes around the world, strong support for Ukraine, Israel as an ally. He's concerned about the competition that we have with China drawing into something much more dire and confrontational. And then there are kind of our bread and butter issues in the region. I had the experience of 6.5 years driving up and down the I-95 corridor between Northern Virginia and DC. They need to fix some of the traffic issues along that corridor. He has a pretty diverse region. It's majority minority. It's leans Democrat. So from his standpoint, that's a good healthy composition. He has an agricultural sector because it extends pretty far west towards the Shenandoah Valley where there are farmers. So he has that constituency. I hope he talks about his garden and his gardening. He's pretty passionate about his gardening. I mean, in the spring and summer, he spends hours on that thing. So, not quite the same thing as running a farm, but he likes to grow his tomatoes and fresh vegetables. So, I mean, I think there are a large number of issues. He has some interesting contenders also. There's some excellent Democrats that have served in the Virginia House that he's going to be competing against. Virginia House members that have legislated at the local level for 1, 2, up to 3 terms that are running. He's been very, very engaged in democratic issues for you could say for his entire career, but he doesn't have that kind of local footprint just because he's in the military and you have to be apolitical and when you're serving in uniform. And he's only been out of the military since September 1st of 2022. So he's kind of new, but he wants to continue to serve in Congress. So that's great on him. I'm a huge proponent of veterans continuing to serve out of uniform like they did in uniform. But he's going to have a challenging primary too.
Which is accepting, actually. I think it's good to have competition, and to let the people choose who they want to be their nominee. But, there's a lot of criticism at all levels in both parties of, okay, well, I guess this is just our choice. I mean, a lot of the Republican primary is just for show. And I really like that in the races where you can have a good faith primary. It's not going to be a lot of mudslinging. And it's nice to see where people stand on the issues and, what the voters think, who is most electable and who they want to represent them. And I think it's good to get back to that in a lot of ways to see how that, because that's the functional part of our democracy and the primary process. And it's the way it should be working.
I'm going to make a prediction here. I'm going to predict that in spite of the superb candidates that he's running against and that have, a local base, the district is obviously larger. The U.S. House district is much larger than the Virginia House district. But in spite of that, Eugene's going to win because he's a superb candidate and he's a proven leader. And he's gonna do what he says.
You're saying that with a smile.
Well, that's because he's my twin brother, and I'm excited and I'm happy for him. And
of course.
I'm going to do everything I can to help him.
Well, I was going to say, if you guys are out there campaigning with him and for him, I think that's a big benefit to him and a big advantage over his opponents.
He also looks like me. So the other thing that he has a benefit to him is he looks like me. So he's,
Oh my goodness.
But his jokes don't land like yours do.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about you guys? You both are prominent, popular people. Can we break some news here? Any future campaigns for you guys?
No.
Well,
famous last words, huh?
Rachel speaks for me. We're recent transplants to South Florida anyway, so I don't think
Debbie Wasserman Schultz isn't retiring anytime soon.
Yeah.
So
how about Governor Rachel Vindman? That has a nice ring to it.
I mean,
wow.
I do wear heels.
That's actually a little scary.
So I could really
You have that,
I have that in common with Ron DeSantis.
Previous governors wear heels. That's true.
There you go. There's the bumper sticker right there.
Yeah.
I wear my heels better. or something like that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I don't even, speaking of predictions, I don't even know after that. I didn't watch the debate last night. I wouldn't watch anything on Fox News. Also, we weren't home. But the clips I saw, I don't even see how Ron DeSantis's presidential campaign lasts beyond Iowa. I'm sure it probably will, but not much.
It might not last beyond tonight. I mean, it was all, I didn't watch it, but I like Newsom, and I saw some clips, and there's a lot of Democrats today who are, quote unquote, licking the proverbial lips, if you will, and very excited. Not this cycle, but
Yeah.
he's got something there that I think could really resonate with a lot of people in the next election.
He's very charming, and he has that kind of, maybe a little bit of that Kennedy-esque vibe about him. But he also, I don't know. Well, the problem is, does he play as well in the heartland as he does on the coast? And that might be the biggest challenge for him.
There's a lot of people who I think I would love to hear a debate among, again, getting back to the quality of candidates.
Mhm.
Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. But I mean, all these, like, I would love to hear their ideas and their vision for what they would do at the federal level, because they're younger. We were at an event last night, and I was saying it was for our daughter's school. She's almost 13, and she's in 7th grade. And we were just talking about that's the governor of Maryland, and he is so impressive. But
He's also former military. Yes,
Mr. Fun Facts. But the
Wait. Is that your new nickname, Mr. Fun Facts? Because I love that. I'm going to go with that if I have your permission.
Yes, please. But, I mean, as I approach 50 in a few months, you realize, like, we're leaving a world, we're not the generation that's going to be around. And what?
Yeah, we're not that old, honey.
No.
We don't have to talk about it like we're hanging off right now.
I mean, okay.
We might have a couple more decades.
I mean, you guys are like almost getting that AARP letter. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't get it already.
They already sent it to me. But
I'm not there. Rachel's much older than I am.
like 16 months. But the issue is, I think they had different experiences than us when it comes to paying for higher education or healthcare issues, even, and so they are going to have to come up with solutions that work for them. And that might sound kind of foreign to my ears. It might not be something that I embrace at first, but it is the way they see it. And every generation, has the opportunity for that. So I'm excited for, not to look just totally beyond 2024. In fact, 2024 is, we're still in like saving democracy mode, I think. But when we finally get, I think, hopefully over that hump and move forward, it's going to be great for people to be free to sort of express their ideas more and more the vision once we get out of what I think is kind of an acute time for our country and for democracy. And then we can really start to make a dent in some of these issues, whether it's climate or, opportunity and the division when it comes to, I think the income discrepancy that we see, it's really led to a lot of these things.
Well, I believe the children are our future.
Oh
we
my
need
gosh.
to teach them well and let them lead the way.
But where have I heard that before?
But at the same time,
That was a brilliant impersonation of Whitney Houston, by the way. I mean, you
Please
close
do.
your eyes.
Sing it.
It's like this. It's like listening to Whitney.
yeah. So, but I would say that there have been some recent events that have kind of alarmed me a little bit. The very young portion that's highly progressive has shown really bad color with regards to this what's been going on with this Israel-Hamas war, and completely misreading the situation in a disastrous kind of way, where they're rallying in support of terrorism. And that shows lack of seasoning. I think the fact that there's a susceptibility based on how that generation consumes news, that there's a danger with kind of being targeted and frankly radicalized by disinformation that we need to figure out how to address. Some of that will come with age and wisdom and some discerning of sources, not 7-second TikTok videos or something of that nature. But it is pretty disturbing. So I do think that we have many capable young people, and I think we're seeing, frankly, because of social media and the echo chambers, we're seeing maybe some of the more radical elements. But I think we have some time, and we have a responsibility. The older generation has a responsibility to help kind of develop the young folks to lead in the future.
I bet Andy's going to ask us about this because he tweets about it a lot. So.
I do. And I also read your Substack. And so I want to read something that you recently wrote about the Israel conflict, which speaks to what you just brought up. And then I do actually want to talk about the election and young people. But you write, quote, "Since October 7th, 2023, I have seen influence operations permeate Hamas's information strategy in their war against Israel. The current far-right Israeli government's West Bank settlement policy and the terrible state in Israel-Palestine relations add credibility to an idea that Israel is an oppressor. The situation is complex, but what is clear is Russia, Hamas, and other illiberal actors are conducting influence operations and promoting false narratives seeking to inflame anti-Israel sentiments by advancing the narrative that Israel is indiscriminate in attacking Hamas, that Israel is the aggressor in the Israel-Hamas war, and that Israel is worse in the conduct of its war than Russia is in the war on Ukraine." And I couldn't agree more with every single word of that. And to your point earlier about what's happening with young people today, how do you explain it? How do you explain this vitriolic reaction without any context whatsoever? Forget the fact of context going back centuries. I'm talking about context just going back to October 7th. Like, that seems lost. How do you explain this hatred?
So I'm going to start with the fact that I'm center left. Certain areas I'm progressive, but I think that there is a danger, and I hate the term wokeness, but with the far left elements of our political system that have generated a kind of a anti-Americanism and a self-loathing that has infected portions of our young population, whether that's college campuses or more broadly, there are the democratic socialists as a political movement is not tiny in that demographic. And I think that's part of it. There's a hypercriticism of the United States and its shortfalls. That's part of the formula here. I think there is an inherent bias. You could go so far as to say anti-Semitism. I'm not sure if it's quite as strong. I think there are plenty of anti-Semites out there, but there's an inherent bias of a minority population that frankly still is misunderstood because it's so tiny within the American body politic, within the American demographic. Tiny. I'd say most Americans probably don't have a huge amount of interaction with Jewish people, except for urban centers, metropolitan centers, and things of that nature. And therefore, because of the lack of understanding or lack of interaction, there's bias. Then, of course, there's the more kind of insipid anti-Semitism. And then on top of that, when you have these narratives of occupation, this narrative of Hamas working to decolonize, and corruption of history, a complete misunderstanding of the origins of the interaction between the Jewish population and the Arab population in Palestine, how recent that was. This is not hundreds of years struggle. This was because they were all existed under the yoke of the Ottoman Empire, both the Palestinian population, the Jewish population. The Jewish population, due to Zionism, started to settle in the region there was always a Jewish population, but larger numbers start to flow in the late portions of the 19th century. Those numbers build through, because of Nazism, through the 20s and 30s and 40s. And the Jewish population settles in desert, unwanted land. And the way they do it is they buy land. They buy, unwanted land and develop it into kind of thriving centers. You had Jaffa, you did not have Tel Aviv back in the 20s and 30s. The Jewish people built that from scratch. And then so they were coexisting. That land was sold freely and fairly. And then there was an effort to provide the Jewish people a homeland after the atrocities of the Holocaust. At the same time, securing for the Palestinian population their own homeland that they didn't really have. Neither the Palestinians nor the Jews had a homeland. It was in limbo. It was a sphere of influence that was subject to the UK power and authority. And an effort to grant both of them collapsed on multiple occasions. It collapsed in 1948 when the Palestinian population and the adjacent Arab states attacked Israel. Multiple times. It was 67, it was 73. And eventually, after many, many efforts, we wind up with today. But Israel is not it's the stronger state, but it's not, and that's partly because I think the Palestinian population was abandoned by the Arab states, all throughout that period, really. But it's not occupying. That is a complete misunderstanding of what's going on. It's just a failure to reach the kind of the end state, which is a peaceful coexistence between the two peoples. Now, it is absolutely horrendous that this occurs in a period where Netanyahu, a radical far-right extreme political figure, notoriously corrupt, seeking to evade a prosecution in jail, has also let security lapse, has abused the Palestinian population, especially in the West Bank, allowed Hamas to take root and control Gaza for over 15 years. And that is also a part of the mix here because you have Netanyahu in play. If you had a normal government there, I don't think we would have had either October 7th or the kind of backlash against Israel. There probably would have still been something, but it wouldn't have been of the scale that we're seeing now, just because there's been heaps of criticism on Netanyahu and the way he's been running a country. So I mean, it's again, like I said in my piece, it's a very complex issue. It's just everything about the region is makes your head hurt. But I think that's part of the reason that and people don't take the time to be educated about these issues. That's why, frankly, one of the reasons I started my Substack to try to dive into these issues and make them kind of palatable and understandable. Not in a full book, but in something that kind of distills facts to something useful and that people could draw some conclusions on. So I think what I'd like to encourage, and what I encouraged in that piece, in the active measures piece, is for people to spend at least a little bit of time, dig deeper than TikToks, do a little bit of reading and understand the issues before they join their friends and and succumb to that peer pressure and go out in the streets and basically side with terrorism, which is what's been going on in huge numbers. I don't understand why people feel a need to tear down posters of kidnapped people. I mean, if it makes somebody feel good to let people know about kidnapped people, why would you do that? It is just like a horrible thing to do as a human being. For what reason? It's not propaganda. These people were kidnapped, and there's an effort to continue to raise the issue. You could, if you want to, you could put up posters of the collateral damage and the deaths being inflicted by Israel's counteroffensive. That's completely appropriate. But why would you tear down these posters? It doesn't. Some of this just doesn't make sense to me, and I wonder how embarrassed people's parents must be when they see their children, doing that.
Sure.
One other thing, and I think this is going to probably be a bit controversial. I grew up in New York City. My best friend growing up was a Palestinian, Sirhan. And I felt always very welcome in his household. Jewish refugee kid from Soviet Union. My best friend was a Palestinian. I have fond memories. Still, I've lost contact with him, but I still, feel close to him in a lot of ways. And I've never felt it from him, but I have felt it in a lot of other settings. There is a inherent trained racism against the Jewish people in the Muslim communities.
Mm-hmm.
It is encouraged. It is nurtured. It is something that is not discussed. There are plenty of, kind of more open-minded liberal Muslims that, so it doesn't apply to everybody by any means, but in large communities, it is nurtured, this hatred and anti-Semitism. And it is not something that's I see addressed in any significant way. And that is fundamental. If Israel has to, yes, of course, if Israel, you could say anything you want, babe. But if Israel is going to coexist in the region, this nurturing of hatred, dehumanizing of the Jewish people, that has to end.
I actually lived and worked in Israel for 3 years. And initially I worked in Gaza and lived there.
Wow.
I worked for an NGO. And I worked with women in camps and teaching English and other kind of health classes of sorts. But
what years were these?
Between the two intifadas, so after the first intifada, and then I had already moved to Jerusalem, when Sharon went to the Temple Mount, which really kind of precipitated
1905.
The beginning of 1999 to the end of 2001.
1999.
Yeah, I know. And I was young and idealistic then. But two things. One, I remember going to visit a student of mine, and she had just had a baby, a boy. And I spoke Arabic then. I guess I still speak Arabic, but just not very well. And she said something to me, and I was like, I'm sorry, did I understand that correctly? And I did. She told me that she would raise her son to be a martyr. And now I want to tell you something. She was illiterate in any language. She couldn't read in any language, and we were working on that. But just for self-esteem purposes. But so I say that to say she didn't have a lot of world exposure. Okay, so I don't, as a mother myself, I don't know how you could say that you would raise your child to die or kill others, but also I know what I'm trying to say here is a lot of these people who are protesting and saying these things have no understanding of the, I don't want to use the word mentality, but the cultural, kind of the cultural mentality, the cultural approach. So we're really good at this in the United States and the West, I think, of projecting, which we all do it. It's not, every culture does it, of projecting your values on someone else because you think it's the same and you think the value of life is the same as you have. And the truth is it's just not like that. And so you're Jewish, you understand like life and Judaism is everything. It's the tie we wear. It's everything. It's the representation of whether you're religious or secular, life is valued. And there is a little bit of a difference there. I'm not trying to criticize a whole culture, but it exists. And so we have to be very careful of assuming that when you're advocating or promoting something that it's the same. I mean, the people.
Well,
so
history and context and perspective are incredibly important, but they're also incredibly absent in this conversation. It
is.
Just to play devil's advocate a little bit, I agree with everything you're saying, but I would think there are people on the other side that would say, well, you know what, Jews, Israelis in particular, are also raised with maybe not to the same degrees, but there is an animosity that is there on the other side as well. I think a lot of that's changing on some level amongst the people. You see all the protests of the last year or so. Yeah. But then the flip side to that is, but then they also elected all these right-wing freaks, these extremists. Yeah. But with regard to the hostage posters, what bothers me is that it's so hypocritical of what these people are doing. The same people that say, look, there are innocent Palestinians in Gaza. They're getting killed. Their houses are being destroyed. They didn't ask for this. They didn't ask for war. They're not part of Hamas. They're not part of the government. Well, guess what? Neither are the people on those posters, right?
Yeah.
Why doesn't that same compassion and empathy translate into Israeli innocent people who are not part of the government, who didn't ask for this, and whose relatives are praying that they still are alive somewhere in Gaza?
That is completely. I think that's a good way to look at it. But I wanted to dive a little bit deeper because you raised some excellent points about the way that the Jewish population or Israeli population is interacting. I think the fact is that I don't know how we get there now, but I think I still am a believer in the two-state solution. It's just again reality of how do you get there in this kind of crisis moment. I think wiser people than me have
Jared
some ideas.
Kushner?
No.
Okay.
Wait. That's a good point. Wasn't this all solved a few years ago by Jared Kushner?
He read like 9 books. So.
I mean, isn't there peace in the Middle East because of Jackie?
Yeah, maybe not quite. So, but I think the fact is, the settlement policy is absolutely horrible under both Netanyahu's government and these ultra radical Jewish groups that actually also don't believe in the state of Israel. I think there's a misconception about what the composition of Israel is. There are a huge number of Mizrahi Jews and Sephardic Jews. Actually, Ashkenazi, the European Jews, are the minority. It's a very, very diverse culture. There are Druze. There are Muslims, Israeli Muslims, that are a major component of the population. So it is quite diverse. And I think that I think there probably far more people get along, but there are plenty of the same kinds of things that you see in the U.S. or in Europe, nationalists. Plenty of Jews that are, probably some of them are Eastern European Russian Jews. Russians actually are pretty darn racist, and that those Jewish immigrants from Russia probably came over with a lot of those kind of racist tendencies also, and have were added to this kind of sharp divide. But I mean, there are so many different layers to this to peel back, and we didn't even. I'm sorry I didn't cover it in my first kind of commentary, but the human toll is tragic and disastrous. Israel feels an absolute essential need to root out Hamas. That is completely valid, and I support that. I've got a security background, defense background. I served in the military. I understand those imperatives, what Israel needs to deliver for the population. All that makes good sense. But that has to happen recognizing that the focal point is Hamas military wing, the political wing, and there are countless civilians in there and children that even if they're radicalized, they're children, and Israel has an absolute responsibility to this humanist, Western liberal urgency to safeguard innocent souls, and we need to hold Israel. We need to hold the military accountable and hold their feet to the fire to do that. I think they are doing that in a lot of ways. Just because it would be shocking if somehow, even in spite of October 7th, they abrogated all of those dear values. But that I would be shocked to learn of something like that. I haven't seen any of the instances of that. I think they're doing the best they can, and still, based on the scale of this war, there are way too many civilian deaths.
I got to ask you this question, because I've been asking this of everyone I've talked to since October 7th, especially to people who are in the ceasefire crowd, or war is not the answer crowd, or people who are horrified, and rightly so, at the collateral damage. If we establish the fact that Israel must eradicate Hamas, but then you look at how this war is being prosecuted and how Hamas is using people as human shields, basing its operations in and around schools, hospitals, communities, private homes. How does Israel achieve that goal?
Well, this is the thing that I in the hours after we learned about October 7th, I said that it's going to be a tragic loss of life because because it was absolutely apparent to me that civilian casualties are the centerpiece of Hamas's strategy. They're not trying to, it's not a accident or a byproduct. They are a centerpiece of what Hamas is trying to achieve. They are intentionally sacrificing maximum Palestinian lives because that they think that will create an outrage that would potentially stop Israel's effort from destroying. This was a major miscalculation by Hamas. They provoked Israel to take this action, but they thought that they would have the support of Iran in greater ways, of Iranian proxies in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon. They thought that there would be even more outrage from more kind of tempered support from, let's say, Germany, that had been ambiguous in the past for Israel. And on that basis, they thought, they would be able to survive. They would take some casualties and survive. That is not going on. I'm very, it's pretty amazing to see the states rally around Israel. And while cautioning and urging Israel to be careful with human lives, continue to provide ironclad support to Israel to root out Hamas. Mm-hmm. And Hamas made a major miscalculation. I think the fact is they're going to get exactly what they want, which is a lot of civilian casualties, but it's not going to save them. Mm-hmm. It's actually, Hamas will be wiped off the face of the earth. I think that's the end state here. But the problem is that we're going to go through more civilian casualties because of the way this war was designed by Hamas. And Israel is doing, I think, what it can to try to minimize those casualties. But this is dense urban settings in areas where Hamas is restricting the movement of the civilian population to prevent them from fleeing, using human shields. And Israel, Israel. What people don't realize is that Israel is completely abiding by the law of armed conflict, completely within the rights to defend itself, to destroy Hamas. The law of armed conflict does not distinguish once Hamas is embedded into the civilian population and uses human shields. Israel is well within its right to destroy Hamas in spite of the human casualties. Mm-hmm. That's what the law of armed conflict said. That was what basically the states that abide by that, that signed up to this international agreement, recognize that that war is the ugliest of human endeavors, and that there will be human casualties. But I think the fact is that we want to hold Israel to a higher standard, international humanitarian law, and even beyond that, continue to urge Israel to, in spite of the fact that it's well within its rights within the law of armed conflict, be even more careful to avoid civilian casualties. Mm-hmm. I think there's some practical reasons for that. One of the practical reasons is simple, that these populations are going to have to live together in the future, or will come to an end. And the more human casualties there are, I think Hamas is being blamed by the Gazans, from the polling I've seen. But eventually it would be Israeli bombs or Israeli bullets that inflicted some of the civilian casualties. And the less of that we could see, the better the chance for kind of maybe an enduring peace. Mm-hmm.
My military experience is limited to watching the hostage rescue in season 3 of Fauda. Okay, so I sit back and go, how are they going to do this? Rachel, I want to ask you, as someone who's lived and worked in Gaza, does it seem feasible to you that they can do this?
Well, first of all, I would say that the population of Gaza basically doubled in the past 25 years since I was there. So a lot more people. Mm-hmm. And most people live in the northern part of Gaza. The southern part of Gaza is where Hamas was started, a place called Han Yunis, which is a refugee camp in a town, and much more religious, actually, than the northern part of Gaza. But when Hamas took over, and really through the process of the Second Intifada, all of Gaza got a lot more religious, and that was not totally welcome. It was also kind of not really religious, but religious for show, because that was what was expected from the people who were in charge. But it is a very small strip of land, and it's going to be very difficult. I think you also need to look at that Egypt doesn't want Gazans. Mm-hmm. Women and children, maybe, but also someone's going to have to care for these women and children. Someone's going to have to provide funds. The Gulf states, they're very good at lip service of talking about taking care of the Palestinians, but they don't actually take care of the Palestinians.
Absolutely.
My point is, when you talk about other countries absorbing refugee population from Gaza, it's a big calculus because what qualifies as a military age male is probably a lot younger for them in terms of what they're concerned and how they view it. And that is the real issue. So in order for any of this to happen and minimize civilian casualties, the civilians need to get out of there. But one thing Alex said, it was a comment on Substack that I thought was really good. Someone basically said, do you not believe like Medicine Sans Frontiers or something, or do you not believe like their numbers? And I think Alex's comment was something to the extent of like, I haven't seen anything that shows that Israel is committing atrocities, but war is inherently messy and ugly and horrible. Again, something that most Westerners have no experience with at all. Also, the other thing you have to understand, and this is the part that I cannot emphasize it enough. Everyone who is in Gaza now, whether you're Palestinian or you work for an NGO or whatever you do, you are there under the auspices of Hamas. If you want to be there and you want to do NGO work, you've got to pay to play. And some of that is going to be,
or you're shown what you're what they want you to see.
I mean, but you have to assume that everything is a hostage video, that there's a gun to someone's back when they're saying whatever they're saying. Some of it might be real, but it's really hard. How do you know which is exaggerated, which is real, which they were told to say in exchange for something else? And that I think is something that's really missed. We're like, oh, well.
That's the point, Alex, that you made earlier, in that the people in this country, perhaps in particular young people on college campuses, they're like talking about Hamas as if it's a normalized government entity that could be trusted with casualty numbers, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, these folks are out in the streets demanding a ceasefire. What is Hamas doing? They're killing people in Jerusalem and taking credit for it during the truce. So
nonsense.
It's absolute insanity, the vacuum that people are living in when they make such big, bold declarations of what Israel should be doing without appreciating what the hell is going on there.
What's interesting about this is that somehow you could separate Hamas when most people acknowledge that Russia is a bad actor, Iran's a bad actor, but Hamas, who is a ally and a proxy, is not. How does that logical leap work exactly? That takes me to the other, what's in the background here is a 22-month war between Russia and Ukraine that people have in large part stopped talking about, but a war that will probably in even maybe bigger ways shape the security environment for the United States. And that it's absolutely essential that in the coming weeks, the U.S. pass security assistance for Israel, for Ukraine, for Taiwan, if we want a safer world for our children and grandchildren. And this war in Ukraine is actually not going particularly well. And the risks in 2024 are high. There's a chance that Ukraine could lose more territory. Russia can regain the initiative. A lot of that is because the amount of aid that we're providing is unlikely to be sustained. And I see a lot of risks there too.
Not only are we not talking about it, not only is it sort of fallen off the media cycle, but you have one of our political parties that's become like Putin and Russia sympathizers and talking about Ukraine as if it's an enemy.
One word, Trump.
Exactly.
It's really that simple. He's captured the Republican Party, the vast majority of it. He has a animus towards Ukraine and an affinity towards Putin in particular. And that is the temperament of the Republican Party, because that's what the leader of the Republican Party wants.
I want to ask you about the breaking news that we learned about last night. You're a national security guy. Israel had intel for over a year, almost down to every single detail about this attack on October 7th, except the date. And they wrote it off as unlikely, impractical. How did Israel not act on this?
Hubris. I think that's a large portion of this, that they felt, I think it's the hubris and the fact that, Israel is such a much more powerful state than Hamas, has all the technological advantages, the training. I think the other part of it is because of the radicalized nature of the body politic in Israel, and the need to, this another element of hubris would be the fact that, well, we've come to an accommodation with Hamas. They've been there since 2007. They haven't caused us too much trouble. Occasional flare-ups. Something of that scale is it's such a divergent path that it's hard for them to understand. And I think part of it was also the fact that the Netanyahu government was focused on a settler policy in the West Bank, and we would be impractical for them to reduce the force structure in the West Bank and apply that to the Gaza Strip and secure the Gaza Strip, because that would be, if you believed it, that would be the requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And that would go against the politics of Netanyahu. So I think these are some of the reasons why he's going to be held to account for this ultimately, after we get past this kind of, once the war starts to simmer down, Netanyahu's days are numbered, and he's going to be held accountable for this.
Mm-hmm. So my last question, the 24 election, you think about young people with climate change, with gun reform, with choice, with save democracy. If this isn't an election that young people should go out and vote in droves, I don't know what is. But you do have this situation in Israel, which is causing a lot of concern on college campuses and amongst the young constituents. Do you feel like we have a real problem here? Or is this something that at the end of the day, when kids go in to vote, if they vote, they will ultimately make the right choice?
So because you captured the last part of it, if they vote, the numbers for the youth vote are really kind of not significant, not sufficiently significant to really make that much of a difference. So on that basis, I'm not overly concerned. I think the fact is that there might be a protest vote. It's a Pyrrhic victory for that protest vote, because they would be voting their own interests by either abstaining or voting for Trump, who is a authoritarian. But there's probably going to be some sliver of that. I think the biggest problem is really systemic, in that one of the two major parties is going to nominate Donald Trump. It's a bigger issue than what we're seeing now with some sort of backlash against Biden. That's what I'm concerned about. I think both Rachel and I in our Substacks have been kind of writing. I do a lot of national security and defense stuff, but I've also been kind of running a bit of a commentary on 2024, and so is Rachel. I think that that's the bigger concern, that we have a coin flip between authoritarianism and democracy, rather than kind of maybe a short-term blip in terms of a rejection of the incumbent administration's politics over a particular policy issue. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, Americans tend to have pretty short memories, and they'll vote on what's closest to them. I think when it's time to pull the lever,
you're dating yourself.
Yeah,
you were calling me old, but you're talking about pulling a lever.
It's a metaphor. So when it's time to pull the lever, people kind of start to reconcile. Okay, this is a vote. I might not be happy, but this would be a vote for authoritarianism. And I think people have been voting for democracy, certainly in 2020, 2022, even the 2023 kind of off-cycle elections. You see that trend, and I don't think that's likely to be upset over this particular issue.
I mean, it's 4 years, and we have a really clear choice. Mm-hmm. So I think as long as we keep on that message and explaining it, and it might not be everything you want and everything you like. And I was just reading something yesterday about AOC talking about Nancy Pelosi. It wasn't very flattering. A lot of times she spoke out publicly about the support she did or didn't receive from Nancy Pelosi and the DCCC, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what? She still shows up and she does her job, even if it's not the situation that she wants, because she has a constituency to represent, and she does it. So we need to be a little bit more clear-eyed and less like, pie in the sky that everything needs to be perfect.
Or wherever the winds blow, for that matter.
Well, I mean, we're working towards a more perfect union. It's never going to be perfect, just as we as individuals are never going to be perfect, and we make up this country. So
wait, this marriage is perfect.
Alex, you're perfect, aren't you?
Yeah.
No, Rachel's perfect.
There you go.
So,
good answer.
I think we have to say what is the best situation, not like the lesser of two evils. That's not what this is. This is what we make it.
Exactly.
The late Pat Summitt said that. Her saying was, "It is what it is. It will be what you make it." And I love that saying so much because there's so much you can't control, but there is a lot that we can control, and that is what are we working towards? And we see it. We saw it in November. We saw it last year in the midterms. People vote. They're voting against extremism. They understand extremism in their communities is not good. And I think, but it all takes work. It takes a ground game, and you've got to get out there and do it. And don't tell me you vote, because great, I'm glad that you vote, but voting is not enough. We need more, and we need everyone to engage. But it is very winnable if we all work hard and get involved. And I think it's good to not get tripped up on one certain demographic or one certain group, but just to say, I'm going to do my best and all I can, no matter what. Because for me, for us, the stakes are very, very high.
We're single issue voters.
Democracy.
Yeah.
Also, like me.
It's very simple, isn't it? We should all be single issue voters.
Yeah. But it is very personal to me, but I hope it's personal to everyone, and whatever level.
Yeah, I think the one consolation that I bank on is that the elections of the last 5-6 years, almost every single election, special election, people are voting for what matters, and people have been voting for the most part for the right way. Hopefully that's going to happen again next year, but you just never know. You never know.
I will say one thing, like this morning when they were talking about the vote for Santos, I thought that he wasn't going to be expelled, but
was he?
Even the loud people,
he was expelled.
He was.
Oh, wow, we've been on the air all morning, so that's great.
He's been expelled, and my response to that is let's see if we could get rid of Bob Menendez and Clarence Thomas.
Alex always has to
start bringing back integrity back to government service.
But look, even the loud people only get one vote, just like you. So even if they talk and talk and talk and talk, and it's all they talk about, and they have the Trump flag and the Trump shirt and the Trump hats and all over their car, they have 38 bumper stickers, they still only get one vote. They don't have a louder voice than you do.
Yeah, I always say that election day is the one day of the year where the billionaire and the janitor have the exact same power. And we should never forget that, because that's what democracy is. That's what democracy is.
And that's what we have to say about it.
Thank you, guys. It's always a lot of fun and always insightful to talk with you. Stay cool down there in Florida. And I look forward to our next chat.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eddie.
Take care.
This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.